this without completing all the initial deals and contracts that we promised about, and we targeted about 2 billion uh, processes and acquisitions in the private sector by the private sector on a number of the state assets. And today we are going to showcase these processes in detail. I know this is center of attention of too many parties, so that's why I would like to showcase these steps in public. Our focus mainly was, as announced by the state, and maybe the president in more than one meeting stated the state goal, which is supporting the private sector and pushing forward the private activity and investment, and how to increase the state foreign monetary. These are the things that we wonder about, the dollar crisis and the foreign exchange crises, and what are the steps that we are taking as a state. First of all, the private sector participation. And honestly, we introduced new amendments that are revolutionary, and huge decisions have been made regarding the investment climate. And maybe the first meeting headed by President Sisi was an appropriate start for activating many of the decisions. Um, the incentives that the state is offering today, including the amendments on the investment law, including all investment projects, will enjoy new incentives, and we are going to expand the golden license companies. The law states it's only for huge strategic projects, but now it applies to all Egyptian projects that the cabinet thinks it is worth taking this license. All the licenses given to projects based on natural gas and energy, such as petrochemicals, right now they are operating in the free zone system with the approval of the Supreme Council for Energy, so that we can open the free zone system for these projects. The new entities can hold these projects for 9 years. A very important point about this is to shed light on is that today, through these amendments presented to the Parliament recently and they approved it, the Cabinet may provide incentives to a number of projects determined by the Cabinet that are exempted from many of the interest for 10 years. They can be exempted 100% from the land interest for 10 years and give them back a part of the land value if they own the land. Allow private customs outlets in cooperation with the Ministry of Finance, and now we can exempt projects, determined projects, from half of the infrastructure cost. The Egyptian state also can, in certain projects, bear part of the cost of the facilities for 10 years as maximum once the project is operated. All these incentives are now in place and in force to enable the private sector to carry out more projects which will reduce the import invoice and increase our exports. So the Egyptian exports in the past 5 years has been increased 16%, and we target a 20% increase annually. To achieve this target, we are providing all these incentives, and the amendments state that the cabinet can offer more incentives regardless of taxes and can be approved later. This is in addition to the industrial activities that will be determined based upon the articles of the law, will have investment incentives by 55% of the tax, which is the income tax that can be paid to the developer or the investor in a short time frame, and we are going to pay back about 35% of the income tax. We also offered a lot of incentives, different incentives. 22 decisions have been made, and I'm telling you today 8 decisions have been already implemented and the others are being implemented during the upcoming period. For example, I want to show you some points that were subject of discussion with the private sector and the investors in Egypt or abroad. It is required that we encourage the free zones, private free zones, and allowing the foreign investor to have accommodation during the establishment period, to open bank accounts and activate them, and opening the ownership and property for foreign investors in Egypt. The law stated that each investor can have 2 properties, but now there is no limit thanks to the new law. So now any investor, any foreign investor